The hilltop lay barren beneath the pale glow of the moon, its rocky surface carved into jagged scars by centuries of wind and silence. On most nights, it was a place forgotten by the world, but tonight the air trembled with gunfire. Each shot cracked through the night, echoing against the ridges like thunder in a hollow canyon. The wind carried the smell of burning metal and dust, mingled with the faint iron tang of blood, and every gust seemed to whisper of endings. Robert Hale crouched low behind splintered boulder, his night vision goggles painting the valley in shades of eerie green. The terrain was merciless, sharp cliffs rising on all sides, ridgelines that gave every advantage to whoever controlled the high ground. His four-man team had been trapped here for 3 long days, their mission of simple extraction collapsing the moment their helicopter's engine failed 3 clicks short of the landing zone. What should have been routine had become a nightmare without exit. He pressed the radio to his lips, voice steady though his lungs burned with exhaustion. Echo 7 Alpha to any station. Requesting immediate assistance. Coordinates locked. Taking heavy fire. Static replied. Nothing else. Not a single voice answered the plea. Hale switched frequencies and tried again. Broken arrow. Broken arrow. We are compromised. Repeat, compromised. The silence that followed was louder than the gunfire, an emptiness that pressed down heavier than stone. To his right, Emma Clark adjusted her rifle and scanned the slope. She was steady as steel, her breath controlled, her eyes sharp. Yet Hale could hear the tightness in her voice when she whispered, "Contact, Eastern Ridge. They're flanking." As if on cue, muzzle flashes burst across the darkness, red and orange bursts blooming like poisonous flowers. The team fired back, tracers streaking against the fog that had begun to creep across the valley floor, thick and suffocating, reducing visibility to little more than a few meters. What little hope they had of using night optics was smothered by the mist, and the darkness devoured even the faint glow of their infrared strobes. Michael Ortiz pressed himself against the rocks beside Hale, his usually calm face shadowed with unease. "You remember the story from Bragg?" He muttered over the gunfire, almost to himself. "The one about the ghost sniper who pulled off impossible shots and then just vanished?" Hale shot him a glare, but deep down he knew exactly what Ortiz was thinking. Every operator had heard whispers of a woman who appeared out of nowhere, erased entire enemy positions with surgical precision, then disappeared into classified shadows as if she had never existed. Some dismissed it as legend, a tale spun in barracks to comfort frightened rookies, but others swore they had fought beside her. "Eyes on the fight, Ortiz." Hale snapped, firing 2 rounds toward the ridge. Still, the thought clawed at him. Was tonight the end of their story? Was this valley destined to be their grave? For soldiers cut off, surrounded, with ammunition running low and no rescue in sight. The fog thickened, rolling like a living thing through the valley, swallowing shapes and erasing distance. Gunfire crackled again, closer this time. The enemy was tightening the noose, slipping through the cover of night with the patience of wolves. Hale's pulse hammered in his ears, and for a fleeting second he thought of Silver Creek, the quiet town where he had grown up. He remembered the small wooden church where his father taught him to pray, and he whispered the old words under his breath as bullets carved sparks off the rock beside him. When he opened his eyes, the darkness felt heavier, pressing down on every thought. Then the radio came alive. The voice that broke through was calm, measured, and unlike any he had heard in this place of chaos. It was a woman's voice, smooth and steady, carrying no trace of panic. "Echo 7 Alpha, this is Overwatch. I have your position. Hold your ground." Hale froze, his rifle still trained on the ridge. Clark's eyes widened. Ortiz mouthed a single word, "Her." The world seemed to still, as if the night itself held its breath. The voice spoke again, clinical and precise. "Hostiles at bearing 045, range 400 meters, elevated position behind the split boulder. Secondary group at bearing 315, using the dead tree for cover." Hale's heart clenched. Whoever she was seeing the battlefield in ways his team could not. Even with night optics, the details she gave were too exact, too sharp, as if she were standing above the entire fight, watching every movement. "Overwatch," Clark said sharply into her mic. How do we know you're friendly? There was a pause, brief but weighty, before the answer came. Because if I weren't, you'd already be dead. The bluntness was oddly comforting. No promise, no false reassurance, just truth, hard and unyielding. Hale hesitated. Taking orders from an unidentified operator broke every protocol. But protocol hadn't kept him alive so far. Ortiz leaned closer, whispering, "Sir," every position she called out. "I see the muzzle flashes. She's not guessing. She's dead on." Another burst of fire tore through the fog. The enemy was closing. Hale's decision came in an instant. "Overwatch," he said into the radio, his voice steady. "We're on your call." The valley had become a place of shadows and whispers, where every rock might hide an enemy, and every breath might be the last. Yet within that suffocating darkness, the voice on the radio cut through with a precision sharper than any blade. It carried no fear, only direction, as though its owner saw not chaos, but a board where each piece had its place. "Emma Clark," the voice ordered, calling her by name as if she had known the team for years. "Move northeast 20 meters to the cluster of rocks shaped like a horseshoe. Hale, cover her." Clark hesitated, her rifle steady on the ridge, her body tense. "Sir," she asked, her doubt directed at Robert Hale. For a moment, protocol screamed in his mind. He didn't know who this woman was, where she was positioned, or even if she was truly on their side. But Ortiz's voice broke in, calm but certain. "Every position she's marked checks out. I see the same muzzle flashes." Another sharp burst of enemy fire tore across their position, the round sparking against stone. Hale clenched his jaw. Orders from a ghost, or death by hesitation. "Go, Clark. On her mark." The radio crackled again. Now, Clark sprinted across the open ground, the mist clawing at her legs like a living thing. Gunfire erupted instantly, bullets stitching the dirt just inches behind her boots. Hale fired back, his rounds cutting arcs of red tracer into the fog. Clark dove behind the horseshoe-shaped rocks, slamming into cover as fire chewed into where she had been a second earlier. "Excellent," the voice said, calm as ever. "Next, Ortiz, 15 meters south to the fallen log. Move when I say." Ortiz was ready, crouched like a sprinter before the gun. He muttered under his breath, "If she's wrong, I'm a dead man." Another crack split the night, a rifle shot from far off. Somewhere on the western slope, a hostile fighter dropped. The voice came again. "Go." Ortiz bolted, his legs driving him through the fog. He slid behind the log, just as another round from the unseen sniper ripped into a second enemy position. "How the hell is she shifting so fast?" he muttered, his voice shaky but alive. Hale began to see the pattern. This wasn't random cover fire. Each shot was timed with surgical intent, eliminating the exact threats that could cut down his team during their movements. She was not only shooting with impossible accuracy, she was orchestrating the entire battlefield like a conductor guiding a symphony of survival. The voice gave no comfort, no explanations, only clipped commands. "Hale, maintain suppressive fire. Clark, pivot east. Ortiz, eyes on the north ridge. Watch for crossfire." Hale obeyed, each shot of his rifle answered by distant cracks from their hidden guardian. With each movement, their positions grew stronger, and the noose the enemy had drawn began to loosen. But the fight was far from finished. From the fog, new muzzle flashes lit the dark. The enemy was regrouping, adapting to the presence of a sniper they could not see. Shouts in a language Hale did not understand carried across the valley, urgent and angry. Boots crunched against stone. They were preparing to close in for the kill. "Overwatch," Hale said into the mic, his tone clipped. "What's your distance from our position?" The reply was instant. "Northeast ridge, 1,800 meters. I've got thermal imaging and clean sightlines." Hale did the math in his head. 1,800 meters, well beyond the effective range of most sniper rifles, especially in weather like this. The fog alone should have made it impossible. And yet, her shots were not just reaching. They were landing with unerring accuracy. Clark's voice came over comms, cautious but curious. "Overwatch, what are you using? Nobody can hit at that range in this fog." The pause that followed was brief, almost dismissive. "I can." The words carried no arrogance, only certainty, the kind that comes from years of skill honed under fire. More commands followed, each one as precise as the last. "Ortiz, 30 meters northwest. See the jagged outcrop. Move on my mark. Hale, provide cover. Clark, you're next after him." Again they obeyed. Again, every move was shadowed by perfect cover fire. It was as if an invisible shield had wrapped around them, carving corridors through the storm of bullets. By the third bound, even Clark whispered, awe in her voice, "Sir, whoever she is, she's on another level." Hale could not disagree. In all his years, he had worked with some of the best marksmen alive, soldiers whose shots bent the tide of battle. But this was something else. This was artistry. The final order came. "All units, bound northeast 200 meters to the stone wall. I'll cover your advance the entire way." Hale drew a sharp breath, glanced at his team, and nodded. They moved in pairs, sprinting, diving, covering, while the cracks of her rifle echoed across the valley. Each report came from a different angle, as if a whole team of snipers had appeared from the fog. By the time they slid in behind the stone wall, the enemy guns had fallen silent. The radio crackled one last time. "Echo 7 Alpha. You have clear egress routes north and east. Hostiles are falling back to regroup. Extraction window, 45 minutes. Hale's shoulders sagged with relief, his chest burning with cold air and exhaustion. For the first time in 3 days, hope felt real. He pressed the mic. "Overwatch, we owe you our lives." The voice softened, carrying a weight that felt like memory. "You owe me nothing. Just make it home." And then the line went quiet. The silence that followed Overwatch's last transmission was not peace. It was the brittle pause before a storm. The fog swirled heavier, curling in ghostly ribbons across the valley, muting sound and swallowing shapes. Robert Hale leaned against the cold stone wall, catching his breath while his teammates checked their ammunition. Their magazines were nearly dry, their bodies drained by 3 days of constant movement, yet they were still alive. And alive meant they still had a chance. "Ammo check," Hale ordered. Emma Clark slid out a magazine, her voice clipped. 2 full, 1 partial. Michael Ortiz shook his head. 1.5. That's it. Hale checked his own loadout. 2 left. The math was bleak. Against the sheer number of fighters hunting them, it might as well have been nothing. Before he could speak, the radio flared again. The voice of Overwatch was calm, steady, as if none of this chaos could touch her. "Echo 7 Alpha, prepare. 30 hostiles converging on your position from 3 directions. Attack in less than 10 minutes. Clark's head snapped up, eyes wide. 30? That's not a militia. That's a full-strike team. Copy, Hale replied, forcing his voice to remain level. Overwatch, can you maintain support? That's the plan, she answered simply. But Hale caught something in the cadence of her tone, an edge that betrayed just how difficult the task ahead would be. He tightened his grip on the radio. Then we'll hold. The minutes dragged with suffocating weight. Through his night vision goggles, Hale saw faint movements in the mist, shadows of men slipping into position, coordinated and patient. This was no reckless assault. Whoever led them knew how to corner prey. Then came the first sharp report of a rifle, distant but clean. Somewhere on the western ridge, an enemy sniper's heat signature blinked out. Overwatch's voice followed, crisp and cold. 1 down. Enemy sniper. Western ridge neutralized. Another pause, another whisper of thunder. 2 down. Machine gun team. Southern slope. Ortiz let out a low whistle. That's 2 threats gone in under 30 seconds. At those ranges. Unreal. But Hale saw the truth behind the feat, whoever this woman was. She wasn't just skilled. She was pushing the limits of human possibility. Wind gusts cut through the valley. The fog shifted constantly. Any ordinary marksman would miss more shots than they hit. Yet she moved like time itself bent around her trigger finger. Gunfire erupted suddenly from the north, enemy fighters breaking cover and advancing in disciplined waves. Hale and his team opened fire, their rifles cracking desperately, tracers burning through the mist. Yet each time their lines threatened to collapse. Another single shot from Overwatch shattered the momentum. Target 3 down. Commander eliminated. Formation destabilized. And destabilized they were. The advancing troops stumbled, losing rhythm as panic rippled through their lines. Another crack. Target 4. Spotter with night vision neutralized. Ortiz shouted over the storm of bullets. She's cutting out the eyes, the head, the heavy fire. She's breaking them apart. Clark fired a burst toward the eastern slope, sweat running down her temple despite the cold. She's not just shooting, sir. She's building us a corridor. Hale saw it then. Each enemy she removed wasn't chosen at random. Every kill was calculated to carve openings, to weaken the crossfire, to buy precious seconds for his team to breathe. It was a deadly choreography, each shot creating the next step in a dance of survival. Another explosion of fire from the south. Grenades arced through the mist, detonating in thunderous blasts that shook the stone wall. The air filled with dust and burning powder. Hale ducked low, ears ringing. Clark's voice came sharp and fast. "They're trying to pin us, sir." The radio crackled. "Negative. They won't. Target 5 down. Demolition specialist eliminated." Through the haze of ringing in his ears, Hale caught sight of movement. Men retreating back into the fog, dragging their wounded, their formation shattered. And still, the cracks of her rifle rolled across the night, each one like the heartbeat of some unseen guardian. 8 shots in total, each one precise, each one final. By the last, the valley fell into silence. Hale leaned heavily against the stone wall, his rifle resting on his lap. His chest heaved as he realized the enemy had broken. The survivors were melting back into the fog, unwilling to continue against a hand of death they couldn't see. Ortiz stared into the mist, disbelief etched across his face. "That's it. They're pulling back." Clark's hands trembled as she reloaded. "No, they're running from her." Hale raised the radio. His voice was raw with exhaustion, but carried the weight of gratitude. "Overwatch status?" The reply came, steady and precise. "Echo 7 Alpha. You have clear egress to extraction. Stay sharp. 40 minutes until pickup." Hale exhaled slowly, relief flooding through his veins. His team was alive. Against all odds, they were alive. He pressed the mic again, quieter this time. "Overwatch, thank you." The voice softened, though sorrow lingered beneath it. "Don't thank me. Just make it back to your families." The words struck Hale harder than the gunfire. He recognized the tone, the hollow weight of someone who had seen too much, lost too much. Whoever she was, she carried ghosts of her own. And then the line went dead. The valley was quiet except for the faint moan of the wind. Yet in that silence, Hale and his team understood something profound. They weren't just survivors of an ambush. They were witnesses to a legend, a phantom on the ridge who fought like death itself, unseen yet undeniable. As Hale checked his men, he realized a truth that would echo in him forever. This night would not fade into the blur of missions past. This was a night that would be spoken of in whispers, a night when survival came on the voice of a ghost. By dawn, the mountains wore a strange disguise. The ridges and slopes, which only hours ago had echoed with the roar of gunfire and the crack of impossible rifle shots, now looked harmless. The fog had lifted, leaving behind jagged rocks and dry earth, as though the night's chaos had been nothing but a dream. Yet Robert Hale knew better. Beneath the calm surface, the valley held memories of blood and ghosts. The helicopter came in low, its rotors chopping the cold morning air. Dust swirled up in angry spirals as the bird settled into the rough terrain, its frame rattling under the strain of the high-altitude landing. The crew chief shouted over the noise, waving for the team to load up quickly. Storms were closing in, and they had little time. "Move it," Hale ordered, his voice carrying both relief and weariness. His team moved with the deliberate efficiency of soldiers who had survived against impossible odds. Their faces were pale, streaked with dirt and exhaustion, but their eyes still carried the sharp alertness of fighters who had not yet let go of the night. Emma Clark approached Hale, something clenched tightly in her gloved hand. "Sir," she called over the din of the rotors. Found this about 50 meters from our last position. Hale took the object. It was a small patch, silver and black, its design unmistakable. A coiled viper with wings spread wide. No unit name, no rank, nothing official. Yet anyone who had spent years in special operations would recognize the symbol. Ghost Division. The operators who worked outside of chains of command. Their names erased from records. Their actions whispered about, but never documented. She was here, Michael Ortiz said quietly, his voice almost reverent as he stared at the patch. Right here with us. Hale turned the patch over in his hand. The edges were worn. The colors faded from years of use. This wasn't some memento planted for dramatic effect. It had been carried, used, and finally left behind. A deliberate mark of presence. Proof that their phantom guardian was real. The crew chief shouted again, urgency cutting through the moment. Load up. Weather's closing fast. Reluctantly, Hale pocketed the patch and signaled his team. They boarded, strapping into the rattling seats as the helicopter lifted, the valley shrinking beneath them. The terrain looked almost innocent in daylight, but Hale's thermal recordings told the truth. 9 confirmed kills, each from ranges that defied logic, each one timed to save their lives. Clark leaned close, raising her voice above the roar of the engines. Sir, do you think we'll see her again? Hale slipped the patch into his vest, the viper's coiled form pressing against his chest like a reminder. Ghosts don't usually make repeat appearances, Ortiz answered before Hale could speak. His tone was soft but firm, the words carrying a strange comfort. But they leave signs. Enough to know they were there when it mattered. The rest of the flight was quiet, each of them lost in thought. For Hale, the silence was heavy. His men would survive this war, at least for now, but he couldn't shake the image of their unseen protector, Sophia Kane, though he did not yet know her name, lying somewhere in the fog, her rifle an extension of her body, fighting battles no one would ever acknowledge. Back at Red Haven Airfield, the team disembarked, their gear weighed down not just by dust and weapons, but by the knowledge of what they had witnessed. Hale filed his preliminary report with careful precision. Unknown friendly forces provided precision fire support during contact with hostile elements. It was true, technically accurate, yet deliberately vague. He revealed nothing that could compromise her safety. Some truths were not meant for paper. The intelligence officer who debriefed him arched a brow at the sparse details, but didn't press. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps he, too, had heard whispers of ghosts in the shadows. That night, alone in the dim quarters, Hale sat under the glow of a desk lamp, the patch resting in his palm. He turned it over and over, tracing the worn edges with his thumb. He had begun reaching out quietly, sending messages along hidden channels, pulling on the threads of rumor within the special operations community. A single name surfaced again and again, spoken in hushed tones, never in official records: Sophia Kane. Some swore she had been killed overseas. Others claimed she had been discharged under classified orders. A few insisted they had fought beside her, describing marksmanship that defied belief. A mind always several moves ahead of the battlefield. Hale believed them all. He powered up his secure laptop, the blue glow illuminating the lines of exhaustion on his face. He composed a message to an address that technically didn't exist, routed through servers that technically weren't online. To the Guardian Angel on grid 34.7251 to 69.4384. 4 men went home to their families because of your skill and courage. We know we can never repay that debt, but we want you to know it won't be forgotten. If you're still out there, still watching over those who need guardian angels, I hope you find the peace you've earned. Robert Hale, Echo 7 Alpha. He had sent. The message vanished into the digital void, and he doubted it would ever be answered. Yet sometimes, the void whispered back. 3 days later, his secure inbox pinged. No routing, no sender ID, no traceable path. Just 2 words. Stay safe. Hale stared at the message, his chest tightening. It wasn't much. It wasn't a promise. But it was real. And in a world where ghosts rarely left proof, it was enough. From then on, the Viper patch remained on his kit for the rest of the deployment. A quiet reminder that even in the darkest corners of war, Unseen hands sometimes reached out to shield the living. 6 months after the Valley, Echo 7 was stateside. Their deployment cycle paused long enough for decompression and reflection. The tempo of missions had slowed, but the memory of that night never faded. For Robert Hale, it lingered like an echo in the corners of his mind, the voice of the ghost sniper weaving itself into every moment of quiet. 17 missions had passed without major incident since the encounter, yet Hale could not shake the sense that their survival had changed everything. His team carried themselves differently, not with arrogance, but with a quiet assurance that someone, somewhere, was still watching. It was late one afternoon at Fort Bragg when Emma Clark knocked on Hale's office door. She entered without waiting, followed closely by Michael Ortiz and the rest of the squad. Their faces carried an odd mix of disbelief and excitement. "What's going on?" Hale asked, setting aside the stack of after-action reports. Ortiz handed him a tablet. "Sir, you need to see this." On the screen was a headline from a national news outlet. "Mysterious donation fund opens new Veterans Treatment Center." Beneath it, a photograph showed a ribbon-cutting ceremony at a sprawling, state-of-the-art facility. The center specialized in treating PTSD and traumatic brain injuries among special operations veterans. Hale scanned the article, his pulse quickening as details unfolded. The project had been funded by an anonymous foundation. The donation was massive, enough to build, equip, and operate the facility for 5 years. Layers of legal fronts concealed the donor's identity, but a single detail struck him like a hammer. Clark tapped the paragraph, her voice low. "Look at the address." The land was purchased from a private owner in Silver Creek. Previous owner listed only as Sophia Kane, private citizen. The name sank into Hale's chest like a weight. He did not speak, but the truth was undeniable. "She's funding this," Ortiz said, his voice tinged with awe. "And it doesn't stop there," Clark added, flipping to another report. "We traced the foundation's history. Quietly, over the last 3 years, it's funneled millions into veteran causes, prosthetics research, housing for wounded warriors, family support programs. Every single one of them hidden behind layers of legal smoke." Hale leaned back in his chair, struggling to process the scale. The ghost sniper had not vanished after disappearing from the battlefield. She had shifted her war into another theater, one that built rather than destroyed. Ortiz scrolled further. "It gets better. Look at this. Private military contractor achieves record success rate. No company name, no listed personnel, but the numbers are unmatched. Executive protection, humanitarian extractions, overwatch for diplomats. You don't need names to know who's behind stats like that." "She found a way to keep fighting," Clark murmured, "but on her terms." Another article followed. Memorial fund established for families of Operation Silent Thunder. The description was simple: scholarships for children of 3 fallen soldiers, funded entirely by the same hidden foundation. Hale's throat tightened. He remembered hearing whispers of Silent Thunder, the operation that had ended Sophia Kane's official career. 3 soldiers lost, a mission classified and buried. Yet she had not walked away. She had chosen to honor them with her own quiet war. Ortiz stepped forward, holding something carefully in his hands. It was the Viper patch, now framed alongside a sheet of plain white paper. On the page were handwritten words, the strokes deliberate and steady. "For Echo 7 Alpha, heroism isn't about medals or recognition. It's about standing in the gap when others can't. Doing what's right simply because it is right, not because anyone will ever know. In the mountains, you reminded me why the mission matters. Thank you." Hale read it twice, his chest heavy with a mix of pride and humility. This was likely as close as they would ever come to meeting her face to face. "Think she's still out there?" Clark asked quietly. Hale's eyes lingered on the patch, its coiled Viper frozen in eternal readiness. "Somewhere," he said, his voice certain. "Probably saving lives right now." The room fell into a rare, comfortable silence. For once, none of them needed to speak. The truth was clear. Their guardian angel had never stopped guarding. She had simply found new ways to shield those who could not shield themselves. That night, Hale sat at his desk once more, the glow of his laptop reflecting off tired eyes. He opened the same secure channel he had used months before. His fingers hovered for a moment, then began to type. Message received and understood. Echo 7 will carry on the mission. Thank you for showing us what service really means. He hit send. There was no reply. He hadn't expected one. Ghosts rarely answer twice. Yet as he closed the laptop, Hale felt the same quiet certainty he had carried since that night in the valley. Somewhere in the shadows, Sophia Kane still moved. Somewhere in the hidden places of the world, her steady hands were shaping outcomes, altering the fates of those who never even knew her name. And perhaps that was the truest form of heroism, not the glory of medals or recognition, but the silent work of those who gave everything and asked for nothing. Legends who walked unseen, changing the course of nights with calm precision and unshakable resolve.